Hey everyone, Brandon and Kyle back again at the Kabuki Strength Lab, and today we're going to be talking about shoulder mechanics in your rowing patterns and how that might have implications towards your bench press training. Now there's two things that we're most commonly looking at when we're programming row variations, and those two things are, do we want them to predominantly carry over to our axial loaded movements, or do we want them to carry over to our pressing movements? Our axial movements are going to be our squatting and deadlifting, things of that nature, and our pressing movements are going to be, well, pressing movements. For most people, it's going to be bench pressing. Now, the two considerations to be made there is axial movements have a much greater demand on our spinal erectors, and maybe we should factor that into our rowing patterns, do things like barbell rows and things of that nature, whereas in our pressing patterns, our spinal erectors aren't nearly as important as our scapular mechanics are. So it is a subtle difference that we should consider when programming, and we're going to show you one very specific fault that we see individuals make, specifically when rowing with dumbbells. Kyle, go ahead and jump on the dumbbell rack. Now, anytime someone's going to do dumbbell rows, a lot of times, most of the time, it's going to be on a dumbbell rack. They'll grab their dumbbell, one arm will be outstretched here, and their scapula will be in this like upwardly rotated position on the rack. Or kind of depending on the height of the rack. In this position, Kyle's kind of upwardly rotated through his scapula, which is not going to be something that happens in a bench press, so that's worth noting. And then when he goes to actually execute the row, there's oftentimes going to be a lot of twisting in the torso, and it's going to end up leaving that scapula a little bit shy of full retraction. So when we are training our row pattern to transfer to a bench press, we are chiefly concerned about scapular mechanics. We want full retraction through end range, but we don't want it to be left there. So we want the scapula to be free to move. So to get away from this kind of twisting pattern and to get away from that upwardly rotated scapula, we're going to bring Kyle over to the bench, and we're going to do a similar exercise but on a bench. This is still going to be a closed chain pattern, which I think is useful for this type of application. Kyle's going to line up to the bench with his feet parallel, one hand bring those feet right there, Kyle. Now, it's very important as Kyle does this drill that he's actually pressing through the bench as hard as possible with this offhand. That's going to provide a massive stability anchor in this scapula for him to then row off of in this shoulder. Now, in this drill, it's going to be a lot harder for Kyle to rotate if he's keeping downward pressure in that hand the way he should be. Good. In this position, Kyle's getting into full retraction. He's not twisting too much, and he's really not letting that scapula ride up his back, which is very, very important. So you can replicate this on a dumbbell rack. It's a little bit more challenging, and you're not going to get the same stability anchor in your offhand as you would if you do it in this manner. So it might be an upgrade to what you're currently doing, but if not for anything else, it could just be another tool in the toolbox. Anything to add there, Coach Kyle?
Yeah, for me, it's just a simple twist on the variation. But just like when I do work on the floor with my hands, it feels so much better to press my hand wide and firm into a bench versus grabbing onto a dumbbell or something. I just don't get the same support. The other thing to note, of course, we talk a lot about shoulder mechanics. Really important, we can't row with bad mechanics and have it help our bench. No matter what I'm doing, if I'm always faulting here, it's never going to have a good carryover.
Brandon and Kyle out.